And now, the moment I've all been waiting for. Time to make a roll cage, baby.
Fucking rules. Said it can't be done, but our time has come. We play with fire and burn.
I've done a roll cage before, and I honestly understand why guys that have shops that do this, that specialize in this, will charge you so much to do it. It's definitely not an easy task. It's very, very time consuming. There's a lot of math involved, and you can easily make mistakes that end up costing you money. I ordered about 80 feet of piping. It cost me almost 500 bucks. If you work it out, that's $5 a foot for the metal. There's a certain thickness, at a certain gauge. I got the bigger size pipe, I got 1 3/4 inch. The Formula Drift rules state that that's for a car over a certain weight limit. Seeing that this is an old school ElCamino, an A-body chassis, full frame car, an old muscle car, it's probably heavier than a Nissan 240. I went for the bigger diameter pipe of 1 3/4, the other option would have been 1 1/2. It's got a 0.095 thickness on the wall, I believe, and that's regulation for Formula Drift. So I figured if I could follow Formula Drift rules, I could probably be pretty safe just about everywhere I go. Now this truck, this ElCamino, this car, whatever you want to call it, this drift monster is probably not going to pass a lot of specs for a lot of competition and stuff like that. It's more of a party car. It's built, designed, put together just to have a good time, just to have fun, and that's the name of the game. But above all, it's got to be safe. So I don't care if it doesn't pass any kind of specs because I have my firewall cut out too much or my motor's moved too far back or whatever else. I just want to make sure that it's going to pass any kind of safety tech so that I could be allowed to race anywhere on any track and feel safe and confident doing it. Given that every foot of mistake you make costs roughly $5, if you're trying to do a big piece and you screw up that bend or you screw up that length of piping, chances are you scrap that whole piece. If you're lucky, you can chop pieces off of whatever you screwed up and use it for later on for little pieces here and there that you might need. But overall, you gotta be pretty careful, not only for your piping, because that's gonna cost you a lot of money when you screw that up, but also if you put it together wrong, like in the pipe bender, for example, if you don't clamp it down properly, you don't tighten it right up, you don't have everything greased and moving like it's supposed to, you could potentially damage your pipe bender as well, which is gonna cost you more money and more time because you're gonna be on the phone calling distributors and people looking for the parts for it. In my case, it's an older bender. It's a cheaper one too, so there's probably not a lot available. So I gotta be really careful in what I do here. Step by step, patience, think it through. Measure 100 times, bend once. Something you have to watch for is the angle of all your bends. Make sure that you're matching them properly, you're getting everything lined up the way you need, and that everything kind of fits together when you're done. It's like a big puzzle and you gotta figure it out. You gotta figure out your distances, your angles, your stretch on your steel, because technically these manual benders, when you're bending a pipe, it sort of stretches it around. So you have to figure out where your bend starts, where it finishes, how much distance it's going to cover in that bend, how far it's going to be away from the initial marking of the bend to where it's actually bent to the angle you need, and then how much further that is on the triangular, whatever. It's, you know, so high school would have been a great idea. I should have paid attention a bit more. This maybe would have been a bit easier, but the point is you got to be really specific on everything and line everything up proper. When bending, I use an angle finder and I check it 100 times before I lock everything in and start bending, because you got to make sure all your bends are kind of uniform. Right now, what I'm doing is the main hoop for the back. That's the bar that goes over the top of the back of the seats. Very important. So I got to make sure that all the bends and everything on that work out good. I got the same kind of bend each side. I use the angle finder for this, and you want to make sure that you have it bent from the exact same angle. So you take your angle finder and you're going to measure all the angles. Left, right, forward, backwards, facing you, whatever it is. And then to test it and make sure that I got the bends properly, I lay the metal on the floor and step on it. If it jumps up on one side, or if a bar is up in the air and the other one's not, and I can move it around and it kind of knocks on the ground, that means I would have screwed up. Doing a main hoop is a very important piece of the car. The rule book states that you can't have more than 4 bends. To conform to the inside of most cars, you're going to end up using 4 bends for sure, because you go straight across your roof, then it comes down for where your windows is. Usually it's on an angle, you got a bit of play there, a bit of distance to cover, and then it'll drop straight down from that point. That'll be on the inside of the doors, and you want to get all those angles matching. It can get a little tricky because you got to measure where your bend starts, figure out how far it goes down, and usually there's about an inch of where the clamp goes on to. You have to calculate that all together and make sure you're still fitting inside your measurements. First bend is always straightforward in the bender because you just slide your pipe in, you figure out exactly where your bend's going to start, and you start cranking on it with the angle finder on the pipe at all times to make sure that you know what kind of angle you're at. Now mine sits on the floor, but with it flat on a good level floor, when you bend it, it should be the degrees from the 0, because the bar is straight on the floor and it bends it up. So whatever you get your measurement on your angle finder here should be pretty accurate. There's a little bit of a kickback, and I figured out that it's roughly 6 degrees, sometimes 4, sometimes almost close to 10, depending on, I think, how much you're torquing that thing, how much you're pushing on it. Second bend is a little trickier because you're feeding in a piece that you've already bent, so you got to make sure that the upright angle that you have on it when you start bending the second bend is definitely straight, so that when it comes up, it's all bent kind of square and flat, you know what I mean? So getting back to laying it on the floor, that's to make sure when you put it on the floor that it's completely flat on the floor. That means that you got all your angles properly done. The third and fourth angles, they're a little trickier because not only are you trying to feed this big loop that's already bent into the bender, but you got to make sure you get your other angles on that, trying to figure out where your 0 degree is, where your 90 degree is and stuff. Like, I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but hopefully you're getting it visually too, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. And with all that being said, let's say this is the intro to pipe bending. There's so much to go over. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, and this video is primarily about building the ElCamino. So maybe I'll do a second video somewhere, another video somewhere else of how to bend pipes and how to set up your pipe bender, how to figure out your angles and your measurements using the one that I use, because, well, maybe not everybody's got one, but maybe not everybody's got the big expensive ones either. So one day I'll upgrade, but until then, we'll work with what we got. We'll figure it out. And with all that being said, by the time that this was all figured out and all done and everything, I test fitted it, and no go, baby. Wasn't good. I ended up not measuring a certain part on the inside. I ended up mismeasuring on the inside of the pipe across the ceiling. I thought that I had more clearance inside the cab of this truck, but I really didn't. And then I ended up with having 2 inches too much, and it would not sit inside the cab properly. So basically, this whole piece, this whole instruction, everything, that it didn't work out. But like I said before, measure 100 times and bend once. And I got a little too excited, I guess, and I didn't take my own advice. So now we get to start from fresh.